All right, hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to this evening's webinar. My name is Emily. I'm from the Fertility Network team. This evening, we're very happy to be joined by Deborah Brock, who is the CEO and founder of Fertility, as well as Dr. Lyuda Shkrobot, who is one of Ireland's leading fertility doctors. Deborah and Dr. Lyuda will be discussing their experiences of fertility, as well as the importance of our gut health and vaginal microbiome. They'll then be taking questions, so throughout this webinar, if you have any questions at all, just drop them into the Q&A box. If you hover around the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see that function. We'll get through as many as we can at the end on a first come, first served basis, and aim to wrap up within about an hour, so by about 7:30. This webinar will be recorded and released on our YouTube channel, so if you have a look at our website by the end of this week on the webinar page, or if you just check our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, forgot the other social media then, we'll definitely share the link on by then. If you have any trouble finding the link, just email us and we'll be able to send it to you. So finally, a big thank you to Fertility for making this webinar possible. And I think that's enough from me for now. So I'll pass over to you, Deborah. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's really lovely for us to be here and for the Fertility Network to have us on. We're really proud to be partners and sponsors with them. So it's very important for us to be aligned to a really amazing charity that does so much work. So what we thought we'd do this evening is we are going to talk about the gut fertility microbiome connection. And what we discuss is that I'm going to go through the, just give an overview of what the microbiome is, what the gut microbiome is, what it actually really does. Is it important? Is it a big deal or not? Is it another fad? And then I'm going to pass over and Dr. Lyuda is going to talk through that fertility gut connection and the importance of the gut microbiome and the vaginal microbiome for our fertility health. So I'll start really I get really excited when I talk about the microbiome, and my husband and my friends are like, oh, here she goes again. But I get really excited because it's such an amazing area of research, and there's so much that can be done that can support our overall health when we look at optimizing and getting our gut to function as best as it could. So when we think about it, you think, okay, what is the microbiome? You know, what is it that you might have heard this, you might have heard the word being thrown around. It literally is trillions of microorganisms that live inside us and on our bodies, so internally and then on our skin. And we've thousands of different species. So there are bacteria, fungi, parasites, and viruses. And as I said, they live in and on us. And in a healthy person, they both coexist together and peacefully work. So they have functions. So if you think, and this is pre-COVID, sorry everybody, but when we had busy, bustling cities, so the likes of maybe in Dublin or London, and people were going back and forth and doing their jobs or going to appointments, now think of that and the amount of people, and think of looking through a microscope. So if you look through that microscope and you're looking down and you're seeing all of these microorganisms and they're busy, exactly like the street, they are doing their jobs. So I just think when I look that way, there's just so many of them doing so much and so many functions. So what does our gut microbiome mean? So we've talked about microbiome briefly there, but what is the gut microbiome? So really they are, again, is the bacteria that live inside our GI tract. So along our intestines, so our GI tract. What's really important about that is that they're not randomly in our GI tract. They're strategically placed along that GI tract to do their different functions and jobs. So from our mouth to our anus, we have all of these trillions of bacteria and fungi and viruses all along. And as I said earlier, working together, and they all coexist in their own ecosystem, and they flourish when they're coexisting in their ecosystem. So then you kind of look and think, okay, all right, yeah, okay, this is something that is a bit of a big deal. It's doing a lot. If we've got trillions of these internally inside of us, it is doing something. So then you think and you say, well, what does the gut microbiome actually do? Like, what is its function? And I think prior to us as a company looking at this area, I would have maybe just thought, your gut is your stomach. Is your gut how your bowels move? Is it to do with eating, digestion? I wouldn't have really been thinking about it and other functions that it does. But it regulates our immune system. It produces B vitamins and vitamin K. It helps with the digestion of food. It also aids the absorption of those nutrients. So the foods that we're putting in, and we do this obviously when we're looking at our fertility and we're eating well for our fertility, those foods that we're taking daily in our diet, it helps absorb those key nutrients that we need into the body. It produces different molecules, and these molecules are really important because they strengthen our gut barrier, and that's what's really, really key. They help balance blood sugar, low fats, regulate our appetite. The gut communicates to our brain, and we might have heard this a lot lately as well around the gut brain axis, but it actually sends signals and talks to our brain. So there's an internal mobile phone going on inside where our gut is actually talking to our brain. To me, that's just fascinating. It protects us against the bacteria that can cause disease. That's really key. It prevents then invasion of those bad microbes and bad bacteria that can come in, and it influences our gut movement and function. So it is a big, 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 big deal. And I think I don't need to overemphasize that when you look at that list that I've just named of what it does and its functions. The other thing to remember, I suppose, about the gut microbiome is it's really important about balance. So balance is so important. So what you want is to keep the microbes, so the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. So we have the good bacteria that they live together. So they're symbiotic. They have a job and a function in human health. So the good and the bad are together. But if there's an out of balance of one, so if there's an imbalance of the bad bacteria, this can cause what's called dysbiosis. And I'm pretty sure Lyuda will talk later and how important that is in particular for our fertility. But really simply, an imbalance in our gut microbiome can cause dysbiosis. That can be caused through a number of areas. So you're allowing these bad bacteria to start to overgrow and take over those good bacteria. And that can be caused from antibiotic use, the contraceptive pill, type of foods that we eat. When we think about it, we're trying to feed our microbiome and feed it well, but sometimes we don't do that with our diets and our lifestyle and our choices. Alcohol has an impact, sleep, stress, and that's always a hard one when we talk about stress, especially in our fertility, because a lot of time we're already stressed and start to work up about what's happening within our body or not happening, and how to try and control that. But they are all key things that really impact that imbalance. But what's really exciting and what the good news about that is that the choices that we make, so the positive choices that we make today or tomorrow, can have a really big impact on changing that dysbiosis. So changing that imbalance and can correct it. So that's a key area that I think that scientists are really seeing, and what you see now is a lot of the DNA sequencing, where they can really pinpoint the DNA of these microbes and the species. They can pinpoint what they're doing, what their functions are. And that's amazing. But what's even more amazing than just pinpointing what they do, they can pinpoint how we can change it. So we actually have a role. So for me, when we look at our fertility and our fertility health, this missing piece of that fertility jigsaw is the microbiome, because we can make slight adjusts and changes to that can have another impact in other areas, and particularly our fertility. That's me going on and on and on about it, and Lyuda's smiling at me over there. And it's a lot of the time you might think, yeah, here people go again. This is just a fad. This is all hype. You might have heard about different probiotics. You might have heard about different good bacteria and bad bacteria in yogurts. And you might think that kefir and kimchi are these new fads on the scene, so to say, but it's not. And I think one of the things that I like to do when I'm trying to describe this is that if we look at the microbiome in numbers, it can kind of put it into a bit of context. So In 1990, there was 24 papers, research studies published on the microbiome. Fast forward between 2019 and 2020, there was over 9,000 studies. In the last 3 years alone, the scientists and experts, microbiologists, have just been doing phenomenal work in this area and are really highlighting the key role that the gut microbiome has on our health and well-being. If we think about it, another side is, we say the human body has more microbes than we have stars in the Milky Way. You know, like, yeah, it's like, to me, that's just phenomenal. And the surface size, so again, our GI tract, as I said, from our mouth right down to our anus, the full size of our GI tract is the same as 2 tennis courts. So we have 2 tennis courts practically living inside of us. And for me, that's just a phenomenal number when we think of it like that. Our gut bacteria, the actual bacteria that we were talking about earlier, the good and the bad, can actually weigh up to 2 kilograms. So if we even picture a kettlebell, okay, I know it's not that heavy when, you know, we're doing our exercise, we probably need a 5K kettlebell, but a 2 kilogram kettlebell is actually made up of that bacteria. 90% of diseases are all traced back to gut and gut health. And if we think about it, that Hippocrates, which is the father of medicine, said all disease starts in the gut. 70% of our immune system is housed in the gut, again. And actually then when we think about it, we are only 10% human and 90% bacteria. So we're really more bacteria than we are human beings. So for me, those numbers are really important because they stack up to show you how important, you know, our microbiome is, our gut microbiome and our vaginal microbiome. And I think then that leads into, for me, and what Lyuda's going to talk about in a second, is why this is such an exciting area when we're talking about our fertility. There's so much emerging research that's coming through that's really pinpointing a lot of issues and a lot of conditions and diseases that we see when we're looking at fertility, back to the gut microbiome and the vaginal microbiome as well. And I get excited when I think about that. And Lyuda, I know we're always, she's always giving out to me because I'm going on about it, but it is exciting because we can make adjustments and changes. And it's something that I think you can really see that can, even a slight change can make a big difference. So I'm going to pass over to Lyuda to talk a little through about that kind of microbiome and fertility connection. And then we'll have a back and forth chat and hopefully we'll get some questions as well at the end. So over to you, Lyuda.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, Deborah talking all about the microorganisms and bacteria. My special interest would be immune side, immunology and fertility, and because that's what I work with most of the times. And believe it or not, but bacteria are training our immune system to respond to different abnormalities like infections, viruses, bugs. So without those microbiome, without those normal bacteria, our immune system wouldn't be capable of recognize any of the respond properly. Because when you look at that, when the baby born, the child, well, the fetus born, baby born actually, the gastrointestinal tract of the baby is completely sterile. And the first exposure baby will have to the bacteria, good and bad ones, through the mother's reproductive tract, and then after that through the feeding. So the first exposure would be through the breast milk, and the breast milk will be full of the good bacteria and the immunoglobulins as well. And that's the very first time baby will be exposed to any sort of bacteria. And that's why the obstetricians and gynecologists recommend strongly to start breastfeeding, to give at least the first dose of the breast milk, because it's full of those positive good bacteria that help to well, sort of live in the gut and create the healthy microbiome for the baby from the very start. Because how your body will react to the immune system, it's the bacteria that dictate that. And there was loads of, like as Deborah said, there was loads of studies done already in the past. The most fascinating one I found was actually the study done on the mice. So if you treat the mice with a course of antibiotics to clear the gut from the bacteria, pretty much everything is gone. And then you can see how the bacteria, how the mice going to react to the different exposure to different viruses and bacteria. You can see that immune system is affected, because if there is no proper balance of the good bacteria and bad bacteria in our gut, our immune system becomes faulty. And that's probably why in the last year we've seen a lot of faulty immune system, because there's loads of patients now suffer from type 2 diabetes, from the obesity, cardiovascular disease. It's all a faulty immune system because the bacteria in the gut is not normal ones. So the microbiome is abnormal. Microbiome is not balanced, and that's caused a lot of problems. And I'm seeing the other side of the story, that I'm seeing the other side of the coin, because I deal with patients who come to me, seems to be perfectly normal, healthy young female, 32, 34 years old, with normal ovarian reserve, fantastic Superman sperm, everything looks great, and yes, no pregnancy. And when you start talking to the patients, you can see what sort of food they eat, what sort of stress they go through. And then when you start doing a bit of testing and see how the immune system is reacting, you can see loads of those patients have quite overactive immune system. There's loads of pro-inflammatory cytokines, very few anti-inflammatory. So there's a big mismatch between what it should be in the immune system and what they have. And the moment you start trying to improve the gut and the response to the immune system, you can see the balancing started to normalize itself, and you can see the improvement in the immune system, and they get pregnant without any need for IVF or any other fertility treatment. So it is very important, if you do have a patient with fertility problems, not just to look at the one single side of the story of how the ovarian reserve look like, but actually look at the whole ecosystem, because our body is ecosystem, and if one part is abnormal, there would be definitely consequences for the other sides. We do a lot of testing just to confirm that, and we see once the patients start on the healthy diet, well, sometimes the multivitamins, probiotics, there's so many different variations of the probiotics you can find in the in the stores these days, acupuncture, reflexology, all the alternatives rather than just a medicine that helps to normalize the balance, that microbiota in the bowel, and then you see the difference in the immune system. Recently, there's been new test, well, it's not quite recently, but the new test, Aerogenomics are doing the test called ERA, Alice and Emma. Well, ERA test is only to check for the receptivity window in the uterus to see when the embryo is supposed to be transferred. But the ERA, the Alice and Emma are the one that check for the microbiome in the uterus. And you wouldn't believe the problems that we can find in the patients who fail to implant, or those ones who suffer from infertility. So you would get a huge change from the positive lactobacillus, the positive healthy bacteria, to those pathogenic abnormal ones, and they invade the uterus. They don't give you any symptoms. You're not going to have discharge, you're not going to have temperature, you're not going to have any signs to tell you, okay, well, something is wrong with my uterus. But inside, the environment is all abnormal. And then it shows itself into the immune system as well. You can see then changes in natural killer cells. You can see changes in cytokine ratio. It all goes off the normal radar. Until you normalize, balance it out, you can't get pregnant. It doesn't matter how gorgeous embryo is created, how beautiful the eggs and the sperm are. It's not going to implant, just because the environment, the whole environment was supposed to be nice and friendly, becomes abnormal. It's like uterus is inflamed, and you throw an embryo into this frying pan that's not going to support that. Well, it's a bit exaggeration, but pretty much that's what happens. So it is very important to look after your own gut, look after your own bowel, make sure that you do have those healthy products that produce lactobacillus, that normalize the environment and pH in the gut, because the mucose in the bowel is the first contact that you would have between the bacteria and the absorption of the multivitamins and nourishment in your bowel. So if there's any, like, I can go for hours, I don't think there's need for that, but if you do have any questions you want to ask about specifics of what we just spoke about, by all means, I think there's a few questions been popped in there. Emily, do you want to bring up the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think, Deborah, that's amazing what you said about how we have more microorganisms in our body than there are stars in the system. That's incredible. I didn't know that. So okay, we'll go through the Q&A now. So the first question is from someone who struggles with taking anything fermented, because high probiotic foods are also high histamine producers. Do you have any alternatives that you would recommend that are also low in histamines?
Deborah, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry, I'm here. I'm trying to. Okay, sorry. I'm struggling to take anything fermented because high probiotic foods producers that are low in histamine. To be honest with you, and to be kind of really clear as well, I'm always clear on this, that I'm not a dietitian or nutritionist either. So I don't want to be giving any advice out that, you know, would be going against what they're looking for. What I would do is that the person who's asked the question is, I'll happily weave an in-house nutritionist, because that's where I think it'd be really good to get that information and advice back from a trained professional who can really, you know, offer you that. And I can get back to you directly through Emily, if that's okay. I just always err on the caution, because obviously I'm not coming from it from that perspective, and I wouldn't want to give out advice that, you know, I want them to get advice from a trained expert in that area. So unless, and I know, Lyuda, that's not your expertise area either.
No, it wouldn't be that would be probably dietitians more than us.
Yeah, and so I'm more than happy. I'll absolutely get back to them, and we can give you some really good alternatives and talk with our nutritionist. So you're getting the best advice from the expert, if that's okay.
Sure, of course. So if anyone does want any specific recommendations, do feel free to email me. That's emily@fertilitynetworkuk.org, and then I'll collaborate with Deborah and Dr. Lyuda and get back to you there. So I think what we can do is we can, any advice for your top tips, take it with a pinch of salt and submit. We're not dietitians, and that they would be the best experts to talk to as well. So we have one question. The next question is, what dose of probiotic is recommended?
Well, it depends. Deborah, sorry, Deborah, go ahead.
No, I think that's always an interesting one, because there's big debates about dosages of probiotics, but actually what they do recommend and talk through isn't necessarily a dosage, it's about the multi-strain. So you really need to think about taking one that has multi-strains within it. And also the multi-strains, you want to look at what each of those strains are doing. So the evidence behind what they say they are doing, and the research that's gone behind it. So I wouldn't be saying there's a specific dosage. I think years ago, if I'm really honest, they would have, you know, you might see these
millions of the bacteria.
Yeah, and they had to be refrigerated, and you had to have like, you know, 50 billion plus up. It's actually not the case. It is about the multi. It's about having a multitude of them. Because I suppose if you think about it, right, if what we talked about earlier is that our lifestyle or our diet or, you know, our stress or other factors can impact on those, right? And the likes of, say, medications, antibiotics can actually, they do a great job. They do their function, and we, you know, we need antibiotics for certain things, but they wipe out your good bacteria, and they can actually completely deplete it, like completely deplete it. So what you want to do is try to repopulate that. So you want to get the good bacteria back in. So if you're looking at your probiotics, but you want each of them to do their job. So it's kind of like having a football team, right? You know, if we had all strikers, no defenders, no goalie, not going to have a really good game. You know, we need everybody on the team, and that's the same with our microbes. We need everybody on the team to do their functions and do their jobs. So I would be, my recommendation, and I know, Lyuda, you get from the reports with the clinics that you work with, the iGenetics, would be to look at a multi-strain.
Yeah, and because they grow very quickly and they multiply very quickly, so you just need to populate them and the right proportion of them and the right numbers, and then they just grow very quickly. They'll multiply it's so fast you wouldn't believe it. So if you get even the low numbers of them, but the good quality and the numbers, the microorganisms that you need to populate, they will repopulate themselves very quickly.
And if you feed them, and you need, like, so it's like us, you know, we need fuel, and so they actually need to be fed. And fiber is one of the biggest meals that they absolutely love. So, you know, when you are looking at your nutrition and diet, it is recommended to have 30 grams of fiber a day, which I know is really, really hard, right? It is really, you can struggle with doing that, but it will help to feed them. So you're repopulating and you're feeding your microbes, which is just as important.
Yeah, there was a question lady asked on the chat about, she's doing ERA test, well, ERA and Emma and Alice with ergonomics, and she's asking if the result comes back abnormal, what does she need to do, because she's already very healthy and eat vegetables and green and all the stuff. It's not about what you eat, it's about what they find in the biopsy. So because if you have abnormal microorganisms in that, they need to be killed first and then repopulated with a healthy bacteria. So normally when you get results from the ERA trio, you will get the populations of the bad bacteria, also sensitivity to what antibiotics they're sensitive to, and also then the list of the probiotics that they would recommend you to do. So you will need to kill the bad bacteria first, because good bacteria, it doesn't matter how strong they are and how many you have, they're not as strong as a bad bacteria. Bad guys always stronger than the good guys. You know that from all the movies, unfortunately. So you need to kill the bad ones first and then repopulate the good ones in the uterus. And that's what you're going to get as advice after the ERA trio.
Thank you. For the next question, what are your top tips for improving microbiome?
So again, what we spoke about earlier, which is the really hard ones, is, you know, trying to reduce your stress levels, which is, look, that's just such a hard statement to make. And I'm sorry I'm saying it. Like, I've been through my own infertility challenges, and I know what it's like when you hear somebody saying stop stressing or you need to stress less. It just makes you stress more. But stress does have a really big impact on your microbiome. I think is sleep, and I know Lyuda would talk about this. I always remember talking to her properly about sleep. Your gut microbiome really needs a good night's sleep. It's really important. Exercise, it's kind of the same things that we hear all the time, you know, exercise, getting out, more water. And as Lyuda mentioned early, your mucosa actually loves water, loves to be rehydrated. So that's a really kind of important one. I know some people struggle with water too as well. It could be hard. Even, you know, just putting a dash of orange juice or something in as well is helpful. Probiotics that we just said there, and obviously looking at the multi-strain of probiotics and the foods, I think, and our dietitian and our nutritionist Sarah would say we've a lot of resources on our website and on our Instagram pages, and we did a big piece around, you know, eating the rainbow, and people are always like, what do you mean eat the rainbow? And, you know, you're going back to school with your Richard of York gave battle in vain. I know I am, right? And I'm counting them on my fingers and I'm trying to do the colors. But each of the colors of the rainbow are the colorful foods. And each of those colorful foods has a really important function and can really help with your microbiome. So it's another thing that we can introduce. And I think if we're being really honest as well, like, you need to introduce things slowly, not these massive changes, because as Lyuda already mentioned as well, the environment is very important. So you don't want to have these dramatic changes to the environment, to your microbiome. So I think small changes, or introducing, you know, your olive oil, as Sarah would talk about this, and you know, spices, certain spices are really good. So sometimes we might think it's hard to introduce other areas, but we can make those little slight changes, you know, in our foods, or more nuts, and just look at that kind of plant-based diet. I'm not saying that everybody should turn that way, but the microbes, they absolutely love a plant-based diet, and they love that. So I would be suggesting, yeah, to just, you know, look at that eating the rainbow.
Okay. For the next question, I'll actually jump in here. So what is a good supplement to take? Obviously, as a charity, we cannot name specific products. Obviously, this webinar is sponsored by Fertility. I'd recommend that you check out the products and talk to your doctor to see if that will suit you. So without naming any specific products, what would be your advice for someone who's looking for a product? What kind of ingredients, what vitamins, what minerals would you recommend they look out for in a product?
Deborah, are you talking about that?
Yeah, or well, if you could talk about what you recommend to your patients, it might be.
I do, yeah. Well, because with the fertility, you want not just the probiotics, but also other multivitamins and supplements there. The complex sort of like a new fertility supplements, some of them have probiotics incorporated into them, and new are one of my favorite ones, just because there's loads of supplements you can find on the shelves in the shops. You find also probiotics as well that are dry or refrigerated, but some of them don't do much. And what I found is if you try new fertility, first of all, it's easy to take. It doesn't give you any side effects when you take it. Sometimes when a patient takes this multivitamin supplements, they feel irritated stomach, they feel a bit nauseated after taking them. It doesn't have that. And what I've noticed is that it helps to actually calm down that inflammation in the bowel and normalize the microbiome in the gut. and help my patients with fertility issues. It's not something that you can just take once and it's fixed the problem forever. It's a combination, it's a hard work. You take the supplements, you also work on your diet, you also work on your nutritional support, you also work on the exercise and drinking plenty of water. So one fit all doesn't work here. So it is hard work. And the stress, as Deborah said, it is a very important factor that needs to be, well, I can't say eliminated, it's impossible. We live in the day-to-day life, we have jobs, we have commitments, so it's impossible to eliminate stress, but if you can try and work to reduce it as much as you can, even if you add extra hour of sleep, because that will compensate for that raised cortisol level that we all build up during the day when we are rushing from one place to another one, doing this and that, and that help that brain to calm down over the night and have the sleep, so you recover much better, and the following day your bowel will feel much better as well. Everything is going to feel much better. But it's there's loads of different supplements you can take, and well, some of them are really good. Some of them, it's not even about what's in the supplements, it's how they are digested, how they are going to be utilized by your body, if you wish.
Great, thank you. And yeah, absolutely. I think just chatting to your doctor about what might work specifically for you would be a helpful first step. So Deborah, you mentioned foods that you can go for. So you mentioned a plant-based diet, maybe more nuts, fruits, vegetables. Are there any foods that you should avoid for getting a healthy microbiome?
Yeah, I mean, there's, again, this is back, to a nutritionist, but obviously it's the bad, our fast foods, our processed foods. I mean, I know everybody's sick of hearing this, and we bring it back down to that, but it is about the balance, right? So, if we're going to be feeding our microbes burgers every day and chips, even though they're lovely, in an 80-20 rule maybe is good, but then, they are just going to become dominant on that and want more and crave more of that, right? So it's going to send more signals back to you to crave more of that, which means you're going to have more. So it's this kind of vicious cycle. And they don't really help. And they just, as Lyuda said earlier, allow for more of the bad bacteria to start overpopulating. So I think when you're talking back to the basics of our fruit and our vegetables, our nuts, our olive oils, sticking with the things that are good for us, and those multitude of colors of the rainbow. So the likes of the red foods, and your apples and your berries, and then when you're into your green or your yellow foods, specifically. So that's what I would say. Again, there could be key. It's really hard as well. I don't know, Lydia, if you find as well with people and may have immune issues or have
Food reaction. Very often what I do find is some patients do react to certain food. Now, not necessarily all of them as lactose intolerant or the celiacs, but you can have sometimes reaction to different type of food. It's not allergic reaction. It's just your body doesn't like that particular food. And if you keep eating that, you will have symptoms like you feel bloated, uncomfortable, you just don't feel well after having the food. Not necessarily you can actually pinpoint what food caused that reaction. But if some people do the food allergy test to find out what exactly caused this, and sometimes you can be very surprised that the food that you love most is the one that caused the most troubles. So once you remove it from your diet, or at least reduce the consumption of that particular food, because sometimes it's impossible to completely eliminate that. Like, to some extent, eliminate all the dairy products from your diet is very hard. A bit easier these days because there's substitutes now, but it used to be very hard. I had a patient who was allergic, believe it or not, to confectionery, and she loved her sweets, but her immune system was completely and utterly out of whack, and we couldn't figure out why on earth was it until we actually done the test. And once she reduced, I'm not saying eliminated, significantly reduced consumption of the sweets and sugar and all the confectionery products, it, like, she became pregnant without any IVF, but she had 3 failed cycles before that. So it is all about finding what is causing a problem for you, because if your immune system is out of whack, there is a reason for that. Like, it could be obvious reason like rheumatoid arthritis, endometriosis, or some other like celiac problems, but it could be just subtle problem that you don't know about. And it may be hard to find, but if you put an effort and try to at least even do the food allergy test, then you might find the reason.
Yeah, and I mean, I think exactly that I think it's a very difficult one, exactly because you could be reacting to various different things, but that's why we'd always suggest that when you're looking at this and you're looking at your fertility health, that you talk to nutritionists and dietitian, you talk to the specialists about this, because they are so in tune with what they're doing, and to be able to support you, because we can, like earlier when I was talking about that, we can actually make slight changes to support our microbiome. We could do the same through diet and food and our lifestyle. And I know we're thrown with loads of different things when we are on our fertility journeys, and you hear this all the time, and it is hard. It's really hard, you know. And I think for me, that's why I always try to say having an 80-20 rule when we were going through treatment. And because I wasn't going to truck everything out, and you know, but I did reduce. And it's back to what I spoke about earlier as well. It's just having a balance. It's not letting that imbalance and you know, take over. But definitely I would be saying, you know, obviously talk to nutritionists, and or go on, you know, the different Facebook forums and Instagram sites. There is some really great information out there, evidence-based information that's out there that people can access. So, you know, it isn't about saying, okay, you know, we don't all have money to go to different things or try everything, and we know how expensive it can be when we're trying. So there are other resources and supports there that I would say to people, you know, to try and access too.
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend a webinar that we organised around, I think it was January or February, and that was with the nutritionist called Sarah Trimble, who is
she's our nutritionist.
Yeah.
She's very nice.
She's brilliant. So if you're interested in just having a look at an overall view of what to eat when you're trying to conceive, that webinar is called How to Stay Healthy During Lockdown. You can find that if you just search YouTube channel, you know, Fertility Network UK is quite a recent webinar. And if you do want the link to that, just email me again. So I think that also covers another question from someone who does have celiac disease and is worried, you know, how can she improve her microbiome? But I think, again, like you said, speak to nutritionists for specific needs and try to find that balance. So the next question is, do you recommend probiotics that are taken vaginally, or would you say that an oral probiotic would be enough?
If you suffer from the infertility, I would use actually both oral and vaginal. If you're just trying to kind of normalize the gut microbiome, then oral is perfect, more than enough.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you're talking to the doctor who's going to prescribe. I mean, I would think that, I mean, Lyuda, you might talk a bit more as well, like about BV and bacterial vaginosis and the, you know, what that has. And I think most people maybe equate that with taking like a cream, or instead of just, you know, an oral probiotic to kind of counteract that. Would you find that with regards to BV and fertility, do you see connections there at all?
You do. Well, in fairness, you have to realize that if you're trying naturally as well, and if your vagina has abnormal microbiome, then sperm is not going to like it either.
No.
So you're going to lose, sorry for all the details, but you are going to lose a good bit of sperm there, because sperm in a hostile environment is not as motile as it should be. So you're going to lose a chunk of sperm there, and then some of them going to get stuck in mucus, and some of them going to get stuck in the uterus. So you're going to lose a lot of sperm, and that will reduce the chance of natural conception. From perspectives of IVF treatments, it's probably less problematic, because we kind of bypass all this flora in vagina. We're more interested in flora in the uterus, and it can be abnormal as well. We've seen patients with BV having unfortunately quite abnormal Alice and Emma test that needed treatment first, and then replenish all those bacteria with the good bacteria, and it works. But natural conceptions, yes, absolutely, that can have a negative impact.
Thank you. So the next question, and you have to forgive my pronunciation. I had 0 lactobacillus on the Emma test and a strong majority percentage of bifidobacteria. I'm sorry if that pronunciation is not correct. So the patient doesn't think that's considered a bad one, but could this still impact fertility?
What bacteria was it? Bifidum?
So 0 lactobacillus.
Yeah, lactobacillus.
Lactobacillus, yeah.
That's one. And a strong majority percentage of bifidobacteria.
Bifidobacteria, yeah.
Well, in fairness, in every environment, in the gut or the uterus or the vagina, you have to have a proportion of the bacteria. So it's not just one invades the whole space and that's it. There's no space for the other ones. It is a balance of the multiple bacteria there. So if there's an invasion of one bacteria over the other ones, and the percentage of one is very, very high, and the other ones are pretty much non-existent, so that's definitely misbiosis. So there's definitely a misbalance there. It needs to be rectified as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, though, within a lot of the bifidobacterium and the lactobacillus are positively associated as well. So you'd see an awful lot of studies that would talk about them and talk through women who had less, so didn't have a dominance of it, would have had failed IVF cycles, implantation failure, and I'm sure Lyuda, you've seen this as well, a recurrent miscarriage, early preterm labor as well, when they had a lack of them. So you know, they were dominated by other kind of more of the bad bacteria that's in there, the disease bacteria. So I think that the studies that are coming through and showing that is quite fascinating, actually. So I don't know if that helps.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question, and that is that antibiotics are sometimes prescribed in IVF cycles. So what would you recommend you do in that case?
Usually the course of antibiotics that prescribed for the IVF cycles are quite short. There's no point to take probiotics with antibiotics. It just completely and utterly defeat the purpose of that. So you usually complete the course of antibiotics and then you can start taking probiotics. But the course normally is quite short, so it shouldn't affect that detrimentally the microbiome of the gut or the uterus, and usually they are prescribed for a reason. So if there is a suspicion of potential overgrowth of bad pathogenic flora, then they are prescribed. In some cases, they prescribe prophylactically to prevent a risk of, let's say, risk of infection after the egg collection. Again, course usually short, so it shouldn't affect that.
Thank you. When is the best time during the day to take a probiotic, and do you need to take a meal with them as well?
There's never really a best time. I think morning time, but yes, taking a meal absolutely helps. Again, you're feeding. So, you know, the more you're feeding as well. So like, obviously a probiotic is you're repopulating. So, you know, you want to then feed them so that they internally will start to do that. And so I would be saying yes. So yeah, take food. It's always good anyway to take anything that you're, you know, not on an empty stomach. You know, but if you're getting a good probiotic as well, you know, you want to make sure that what it says on the back as well, that it says the CFU, so the colonizing the units in particular, that at the end of shelf life, so not as a manufacturing, you want to see that it says end of shelf life, the amount of bacteria that's still there. You want to make sure that, you know, you're looking at a type that has a better encapsulation system. So whether you've got the capsules then ensure that it arrives alive and does exactly what it should do, because some maybe don't have that kind of forward technology in the capsules, and the acid, you know, we've got bile, everything else that's going on there will kill them off, right? So you want them, like you're taking this, you're doing it, so you want them to actually arrive and be able to do their functions and jobs so they do. So I would be saying always look out for that as well, and look out for testing as well. Make sure that you're getting a product that's tested a few times so you know exactly what's in that product.
Okay, thank you. So can we get tested at the GP to check our gut microbiome? What would you ask for to get that test? What is the test called?
The gut?
Gut health and microbiome, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's not specific tests for the gut microbiome, unfortunately. The one that we use for the uterus is actually endometrial biopsy. So it is quite invasive test because we have to take a sample from the uterus, that piece of tissue from the uterus, to analyze for that. So it is mostly for the specific problems with fertility. When it comes to the gut, I don't think, Deborah, do you know any tests that can be, like, you need to have like a biopsy of the mucosa of the gut to have this?
Yeah, there are a lot of tests out there, and we wouldn't be recommending anybody to specifics, because there's a bit of conflicting, I suppose, information on the research behind them as well at the moment. So some of them, take a stool sample and you send the stool sample away, and they'll analyze that and come back with a list of various things. I know we worked with one of the leading kind of research centres in Ireland called APC Microbiome, and one of the lead kind of investigators is a guy called Paul Cotter, and he speaks about this and about testing, and just said the research is just not there quite yet about the home kind of testing kits. I'm not saying stay away. If somebody really wants to do that, you recommend what you would like to do yourself, but the leading researchers in these kind of key areas are kind of saying it's not yet there, but it's getting there, but that's like all research. I think Lyuda and I only spoke about this a few weeks ago about, there's only like 42 years ago where IVF was considered new and, groundbreaking, and like that's not a long time when we think about research. But there are an awful lot of the companies out there. So have a look at it and really do. I think if there's other issues going on, though, you should really, really be talking to your GP, who may recommend that you go see a gastro specialist, in this particular area. So always discuss any issues or any concerns that you would have with your GP first and foremost, because they can direct you in an appropriate way.
And don't try to get a biopsy yourself from the bowel.
Well, no.
Yeah, we would advise against that. So the next question is from someone who has had the ZFB indicating NK cells are slightly higher on 4.1% and 3.8%. The patient has had 2 failed transfers. Should she be looking at probiotics?
Well, absolutely. There's definitely no harm in taking them. And again, the probiotics have been proven to normalize the balance between the cytokines, the pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory cytokines, and slightly reduce the aggressiveness of the NK cells. So yeah, if you have abnormal ZFB, by all means, try probiotics to normalize it. There's alternative to that would be probably more focused would be medicinal mushrooms to try, because they can target specific cells that are abnormal in a ZFB. But probiotics, if you normalize the inflammation in the bowel, that will reduce the inflammation in the uterus as well.
Thank you. So as we're kind of coming to a close now, so I'm going to try and have a look for the more generic questions here. And if there's any that we don't get around to, then do feel free to email me at the end of this webinar. So the next question, is there a stronger link between women with PCOS and fertility issues versus poor gut microbiome? So anything you know of between PCOS and gut health?
PCOS is abnormal sugar absorption, so definitely will have a negative impact on the microbiome of the gut and also microbiome in uterus as well. So yeah, absolutely, there's a huge link between, because PCOS patients, if it's a true polycystic ovary syndrome we're talking about, not polycystic ovary trait, they would have, apart from the abnormal metabolism of sugar, they also would have high androgenic state as well, so the high level of testosterone. So there's loads of hormones are abnormal there that creates this platform for bad bacteria to progress and a good bacteria to kind of be attacked and destroyed. So absolutely, by all means, if you can normalize that bowel microbiome, it will help with polycystic ovary as well.
Thank you. Okay, and the next question, how much of an impact does IBS play on implantation? And if it does have an impact, what can you take to reduce it?
IBS is one of the horrible inflammatory diseases of the bowel, unfortunately. And again, the same comes to that. It's the same vicious circle. The inflammation that you have in the bowel will spread everywhere. It will trigger the inflammation markers to go high in the bloodstream and then increase the level of the cytokines in the uterus as well. If it's just a mild IBS, probiotics usually help very well. If it's severe IBS, I've had patients who suffer a lot with that, and we did have a struggle to try to normalize the inflammation markers. It's possible, but it is hard work as well. So yes, unfortunately, you do have problems with IBS, with fertility as well.
Okay, and similar question, if someone is experiencing endometriosis and is having difficulty conceiving, would you recommend probiotics to help that?
Yes, Absolutely, it helps as well. Same story. Endometriosis, the same as IBS, are inflammation disease, inflammatory process, and every inflammatory process it needs to be tackled. Probiotics kind of like it's like a well, pour water over the fire, trying to normalize the environment in the bowel, normalize the environment everywhere else. It helps with inflammation markers, reduce the inflammation, and help with implantation.
Okay. Someone's asking for a success story with any of your patients who've taken supplements and seen positive results.
Deborah can actually tell that because she has quite a few success stories, patients who started on the supplements. We are not supposed to mention that here, but how many months, Deborah? Was it 2 or 3 months on the new?
We've now, I suppose, look, I'm always really clear as well. I think everybody's the same when I talk about, you know, when you look at your fertility health in a like a puzzle, right? So it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Each of those key pieces of that jigsaw puzzle need to come together. So whether that's, you know, working with a doctor like Lyuda, who's so progressive and so open, you know, whether you're looking then at your lifestyle, the changes that you make there, your diet, then you're taking supplementation, which is supposed to be supplement to all the other aspects that you're doing. And then, like we spoke earlier, Lyuda said about, you know, holistic therapies like acupuncture or reflexology or whatever what's going to work for you. They're all part of that kind of fertility health jigsaw. And our company and product is part of that. And I mean, we set up to support others. And so since we've been going, we now have part of that jigsaw, 12 successful pregnancies. And we're really proud of that. And, you know, 2 of those have been where, and Lyuda will attest to one of them, started, you know, taking this kind of looking at their preconception health and looking at that importance of those couple of months before, you know, maybe an IVF fresh cycle or FET transfer, and got pregnant prior to that. And we've had another lady who was, you know, has PCOS, been trying for a number of years, and was on it for 2.5 months and has successfully, you know, got pregnant. But we are, and Emily, I'm really clear on this, we're part of that bigger picture of all the other pieces. As Lyuda said, you have to be working on everything to try to make sure that they come together and get yourself and your body in the most optimum position that it can be for pregnancy. And I think that's what's really key. So whether that's going through you know, with the likes of an IVF specialist like Lyuda, or naturally, you really want to get, and Lyuda said it earlier, and so our environment, you know, our internal environment, our microbiome, the environment there, you know, we want that ecosystem to be happy. We want them to be doing their functions and their jobs well, and we want to be feeding them the good things that they can do to support that. We want to stop inflammation. We want to stop the damage that can happen, that the bad bacteria, you know, can take over. So all of that is combined with what we said earlier, that, you know, the diet, you know, your nutrition, your sleep, all the key things that we do tend to know we need to do when we're looking towards our fertility health. But we are very, very proud. You know, we want to support people. We are part of this community. We've been there, and you know, I don't mind saying, and I say it all the time when I'm with Lyuda, like, you know, I'm sitting here as a mum today because of Dr. Shkrobot, because of her progressive approach as a physician, because she looks at all of those other key areas and says they all need to come together to support her patients, and they're all individual as well for you know, each patient. But sorry, I get a bit I get a bit excited when I'm talking about that, because like it is important that people are given the right information, the correct information, they have the resources, or if we don't know the answers, like I said earlier, you know, we will put you in touch with the right experts and make sure that you get that information, and then you can be armed to do what you want to with that information.
It is very important, like whatever you're struggling with, the fertility or the IBS or any other conditions, it's a teamwork. It's not always just one specialty. That's it. Like if you have a problem with fertility, just go to the fertility specialist. If you have this one side sort of approach, you're never going to be successful, because on my own, without help of the acupuncturists, nutritionists, the supplements, I won't be able to succeed. And I always say to the patients, it is a preparation that is important, because it's easy to go and just get somebody to go for the IVF cycle, but without the preparation, you're not going to be ready to do the cycle. You're never going to be successful. It is a teamwork, and it does take a few people to actually find the perfect solution for the whatever problem you have. So take a time and just look at the supplements, look at the multivitamins, look at everything available to you, not just the doctors. Yeah, same by myself.
Thank you. I think that's a really nice note to end on. And like you said, it's so important to look at the bigger picture and make sure that the teamwork is happening. I like the corny phrase that the teamwork makes the dream work.
It is, in fairness, yes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just say a huge thank you for your time and for your advice here on behalf of all the attendees. Thank you so much. Thank you also to New Fertility for making this happen. And a big thank you to everyone who's watching as well. Thank you for your time and for trusting the advice in this webinar as well. So if you feel like you need any emotional support, of course, Fertility Network is there for you. Do have a look at the resources on our website. And like I said, we do have a nutrition webinar on our YouTube channel. You can find that if you look for how to stay healthy during lockdown. It's quite a recent webinar with nutritionist Sarah Trimble. Again, it's not just about gut health, but overall foods to avoid, foods to look at when you're trying to conceive. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope you all have a lovely week ahead. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who joined us, and thanks for having us.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.